Good evening, Dr. Brockfeld's class. Thank you, Dr. Brockfeld, for asking me to come to the class and discuss NIH grant awards with you. I titled my slides Navigating NIH. My name is Dr. Thomas, and I'm in the Department of Mathematical Sciences. I was going to screenshot myself, but I don't look very good today, so I'd rather just let you go to a headshot to see what I looked like about 10 years ago. Let me begin with the different types of mechanisms. And this NIH is much different than NSF. First of all, it's much larger. And so you have all kinds of different types of support. And those support have different pieces to them. So I tried to organize them in a way I pulled from my collaborator, Dr. David Allison's talk on types of mechanisms to organize them in some way for you. And then I'm going to highlight some of them a little bit more that would be of interest to your population. So the first are the F grants, so F31, F32, and F33. F31 is of the most interest to you. It is for graduate students. So I'm going to hit a little bit more of those and what is entailed. Then there's the diversity supplement where you, if you are a underrepresented minority and they have the different classifications on NIH's website, you can tag on to someone else's NIH grant as a supplemental grant. There's a series of grants called the K Kiosk, which is also of interest, possible interest to you. They're called early career. They're typically thought of early career, postdoctoral, or early faculty member level grants. RO3s, I actually do not recommend RO3s for you, although people mistakenly think of RO3s as being a beginner's grant. It is a grant for a pilot, or they're smaller size grants, about $50,000 to $75,000 per year, maybe around there. You can look on NIH Reporter to see the amounts of these. But what's mistakenly thought of as a early career or graduate student, easier to get, those things are in fact untrue. So I really recommend that you look at the RO3 description before you mistakenly think that this might be something for you. R21 is also another one which is often mistaken for a not being as hard to get as an RO1. RO21s are sometimes considered exploratory grants. You don't necessarily need to have preliminary data for that grant. However, they are just as equally difficult to get as the RO1. So the big grant is the parent RO1 grant. It's the main research grant. Sometimes you get RO1s with calls attached to them, where kind of like NSF does, where there's something of particular interest. Or if I have an idea, I just have an idea and I don't really want to search around where I exactly fit into a program announcement, I can send what's called an unsolicited RO1. Most of the grants submissions that are submitted to NIH are unsolicited RO1s, so they are not falling into some particular call. These days, I only send unsolicited RO1s because I don't quite fit in as a mathematician to each tiny thing, so I just kind of send it in as an unsolicited RO1. The next two, the SBIRs, STTRs, they might be of interest to you because we have a lot of businesses in the area, and the R15 is probably the most difficult one to understand for Montclair State University and university of our size. So I'm going to hit those a little harder. So going to the one of most interest to you, F31 is a doctoral student grant, F grant. And you can apply for the F31 midway through your doctoral career. So that is very different than the NSF. NSF wants the doctoral student grants to be done very early. So keep this one in mind, the F31, if you're thinking of going to NIH. F32s, you might not want to write a grant while you're working on your doctoral thesis, but if you would like to write an NIH grant for a postdoctoral award, the F32 is a postdoctoral award. And in fact, one of the young faculty members or postdocs that we had in our NIH-funded R25 workshop came back the second year on an F32. F33 is for the case where you're learning a different area. So maybe you're in environmental sciences right now, but you would like to apply your science to obesity. And you know that I'm an obesity researcher, so you can come work with me on an F33. So they're also kind of your training in a different area. You're taking your first area of knowledge and you're putting that into a second area of knowledge. The diversity supplement I mentioned earlier is you should check the details of who's eligible. Underrepresented minorities, they have also disabilities covered under there. you join in an existing grant. So you have to know somebody that has an NIH grant that you would like to supplement with. The K kiosk is also of interest to you. They are considered early career. I'd like to give a mention to the K25, which might not be particularly you, but if you have a strong quantitative background, it could be. The K25 is tremendous. So this is a grant that you apply for after you finish your doctorate, but it is a grant that buys you out of complete teaching or any other requirement that you have, any other duties that you have at your university for 5 years, so that you can switch your quantitative background into the biomedical research sciences. Now, the K25 in different groups, so there's different divisions at NIH, like I usually submit to the National Institutes of Diabetes and Disorders and Kidney Diseases, that NIDDK. NIDDK doesn't give a lot of K25s awards, and I didn't make a slide about NIH Reporter, but you really should Google search NIH Reporter, and you'll see a search tool where you can search what's been funded. So you can look at K25 in different divisions if you're interested in that. Then there's another few sets of smaller grants. K99 is an early start grant. One of my colleagues had a K99. These are often called the kangaroo kiosks. So I think that you're just beginning. K07 is also an early career award. They say that they're easier to get, but what I've heard from early career faculty is that it's hard to apply for a K and get the K. We had a colleague here on campus who had a K award in public health. So we do have a history of getting a K award. I would recommend, if you're interested in the Ks, to contact her. Her name is Stephanie Silvera from Public Health. So those are my pieces on the ones of most interest to you. I'd like to go back to the last two on here underneath R01, which might be of interest to you. The SBIR is a Small Business Innovation Research Grant. STTR, I forgot what it stands for, but the STTR is like a SBIR where you partner with an industry, a small business, and you apply. The STTR allows you to go through the university, so you could be the PI. The SBIR requires the partner business individual who is involved to be the PI. So I applied for an SBIR, and I did get the SBIR, and I chose not to do the STTRs because online you can find what's called pay lines, and what you'll find is the STTR has a higher pay line. That means it's harder to get than the SBIR. So what I decided to do is partner with my colleague Carrie Salafia, who is who directs a small business, and she went as the PI, I went as the co-PI, and we recently just got an SBR Phase 1 award. So they are in some ways easier to get. The partnership is very, very important. You can't have them in name only. They really need to be involved, and it has to be something that's something that changes and transforms industry. So you have to have a business plan somewhere in mind. The R15 is called an area grant, and I forgot what the acronym stands for, but the idea is that the R15 is really for smaller institutions, but not really. So this is the most misunderstood grant, I think, or mechanism that's out there. So I think it's often confused with an RUI from NSF, but has no parallel, actually. It is a grant that's supposed to enhance the research environment of our institutions like us that do not have that much NIH funding. However, the language in the grants can, in the award, actually can make different institutions eligible for it, like large institutions like University of South Carolina, which has the big cancer institute, eligible for the R15, even though they're not an institution like Montclair State. So beware, this grant is actually difficult to get, and sometimes I see people applying at Montclair State thinking that it's like an RUI, which are not easy to get in the first place either for an NSF, but in fact you're thrown in with the wolves of the R01. So if you have a very good idea and you have the science to back it up and the preliminary data, you might want to consider just going in for the R01 because you are going to be competing with a lot. So I have some tips. My biggest tip is start early. I see often at Montclair State, people do not start, in my opinion, early enough. I have a grant due February 5th. I'm speaking to you from Richardson Hall right now, and I'm already done. I was done yesterday. I started the grant a year ago. So I start very early collecting everything that I need and writing that research plan and giving myself time. Another tip that I've heard at Montclair State is I believe I'm the only individual that drafts my own letters of support. This is really important. When you need someone to write a letter for you, you're burdening them. You need to make sure that you remove that burden as much as you can. And you can also ensure that your letters come in a timely manner. I also use the letters of support for other purposes. They are letters that can give information to the reviewers that I myself cannot. So this is a letter of support that I drafted for Dean Bob. Oh, actually, this is my chairperson. So one of the difficulties or challenges I had as a mathematician going in for NIH grants is that I'm competing with biomedical scientists. Biomedical scientists publish at a much quicker pace and are well funded compared to mathematicians. Most mathematicians are not funded at all, and most mathematicians publish maybe half a paper a year. So the publication rate is much lower, if even that. So what I did is I drafted a letter from Dr. Roberts, who was the chair of my department, describing the differences in mathematical sciences versus biomedical research. And it had documentation in there. You're just looking at the beginning of her drafted letter, which I give to her and I ask her to edit as she wishes and put on letterhead and sign. And she did indeed do that. So you can use your letters like that. I use my letters from Dean Bob to ensure that the university supports what I do, and I have documented evidence of all the different things they've done for me to show that the university is invested and committed in me. So that's how I use Dean Bob. So this is how you can set up your letters of support in a way so that people aren't saying the same thing. Each one of them kind of puts together a case that you are the best person for this grant. The other thing that I've seen, a tip that I have, is make sure your paperwork is done in parallel to your research plan writing. Investigators usually focus on their research plan. It is the most important thing you write because that's how they're going to evaluate your science. And your study section and how that's done or how that's evaluated is done by evaluating your research plan. But all the other pieces, your facility section, your bio sketch, all of those things are things that are evaluated as well. And don't do those at the last minute. I have those things going on at the same time in parallel as I'm writing the research plan. Oftentimes, I have a researcher I really want to bring on my grant because they really contribute in some way, but they don't have a bio sketch. I have a grant that just went out that I told you about on bariatric surgery. Some of my surgeons on my grant are in the operating room all day, and they have very little to give at the end of the day as far as paperwork. So I had my student team draft their bio sketches for them to ensure the quality of the bio sketch is high and take care of that paperwork. So I really think out of the box about getting all these other pieces done and done early. Here's something that you might not have been told. If English is your second language, consider hiring an external copy editor. They are about $250 per document. All they do is they tighten up your English. You have to be done even earlier to do something like this because you need the copy editors to have some lag time to actually look over your proposal. So this go round, I didn't hire a copy editor, I hired a medical writer, which is much more expensive and much more detailed and much more back and forth and collaborative. The copy editor only checks your English and to make sure that your writing flows, your English flows. They don't actually participate in making sure your grant looks good. Another tip that I have is to read your grant out loud. I know people tell you to do this and it feels very strange. I don't have time sometimes to read my grant out loud. Adobe has a feature, Adobe PDF has a feature. Let me see if I can pull it up here and see if I have some Adobe PDFs that I can pull up to show you. We'll just go to one of my grant areas here. So let's go to my revised proposal. If you look at my project narrative here, it's a PDF. I want to show you this because it's nice and you don't have to feel like an idiot reading your grant. See this read out loud under view, activate read out loud, and when you click,
blank. Press font and bridge.
Yes, it sounds like Stephen Hawking's reading it, but you see that you can get it read out loud to you. So sometimes I'm doing something else, and I drown myself when I'm writing a grant. So I actually, when I'm doing something else, I have my read out loud going so I can hear it. And oftentimes I make edits right there and then when I hear something like, wow, that sounded very Daniel Steele, bad writing. I think I need to fix that. So I'd go in there and fix it. So another recommendation is not, if you don't want to read it out loud, you can have Adobe read out loud do it for you. Here's some more tips. Collect successful proposals to look at to get an idea of what's success. So what I did is I compiled now a good list of grants that have been scored at various different ranges and have different kinds of scores. So I can really see what the difference is between a percentile score of 1, which is absolutely fabulous, to a percentile score of 40, which was the C- at the time of getting in and getting awarded. So seeing that really big range, I just went and asked people. You as a graduate student may not have the ability to ask people yet. You might have connections, but you can go to your advisor and say, do you know some people who have been awarded that would be willing to share their proposals with me? That gives you a good idea of the quality of writing that's needed. There's a lot of review materials on NIH's website. I've listed 2 here. They're URLs and they're very long, but I gave Dr. Brockfeld the slides. If you want the actual slides, you can just click and go to them. One is just tips on writing really well. And NIAID, the National Institutes of, I forgot what the AID stands for, but they have really good descriptions and sample grants that you can look at. And there's also these videos where they show you about what it looks like when the study section is reviewing your grant. I really recommend you watch the videos. You can imagine what that is like, but you get a big picture of how the grants come together and how they're reviewed. They're not all R01s at the same time. They could be from varying different institutions and varying mechanisms, but you get to view that process and that exchange people make in a study section. It's a mock study section. Very revealing. So I spent a lot of time, initially when I was writing my first few grants, looking at these tools online. I want to show you what that outside help looks like. This is my bariatric surgery grant that I'm submitting in a few days. And you see that I start off with language. Bariatric surgery represents the most effective treatments for patients with class 2 and class 3 obesity. Patients undergoing surgery sustain substance. Okay, so I have the writing there. And this is actually pretty decent writing. This is the kind of writing I submitted before and got awarded with. This is what happened when I had the medical writer take it. The overarching aim of this project is to train and test multi-neural networks that predict the optimal bariatric surgery choice in individual patients. Upfront clear, she helped me revise this entire project so that it's clear to the reviewers what I'm trying to do. I think one of the comments I got back from one of my collaborators after he saw the before and after is, well, if you don't get funded, it won't be because they did not know what you were trying to do. So I am now addicted to getting outside help by pay. I know people tell you, get people to read your grant for you, get your peers to read your grant for you, but people are busy and they won't sink the time into it unless they really, really love you. It's the same kind of person that helps you move your house for you. There's not too many people out in the world like that. So if you do actually go into your pocket and dip in and pay for outside help, I think it's worth it. To me, it's worth it to see that difference. The outside help I used was a medical writer, not a copy editor. Copy editors are just cleaning up your English. The copy editor is not collaborative with you going back and forth. This is just a snapshot over the last few days of my exchanges with Robin, who was the medical writer that looked over my grant with me. It was an exchange. So she didn't do the work for me. She would tell me suggestions. She didn't want to change the content of my grant. She wanted to make sure that I'm okay with something. She was looking at things and revising, and I was revising some things back. And so back and forth we went. This is just a snapshot to tell you that it wasn't that I was laying in her arms and she was doing the work for me. It really was an investment on her part as well, back and forth like this. But again, I tell you, it was well worth it. I had one of our colleagues who is an exceptional writer give me 3 thumbs up, and he only has 2 thumbs on the final product. So that I've never got that from him. So that was terrific. So that's the end of my tips and my discussion on NIH. If you would like to contact me, I will stop by your class next Wednesday and introduce myself to you so you know who I am. Thank you, Dr. Brockfeld, for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to be part of your class.